Dave Talks Comics, Episode 13. Dave Talks Comics is a collection of my thoughts, memories, and musings on comics I have read. Dave Talks Comics can be found on the web at davetalkscomics.com. On Twitter, at Dave Talks Comics. Email can be sent to dave@davetalkscomics.com. On this episode, I talk about Namor the Submariner, Issues 10, 11, and 12, which I like to refer to as the Invaders arc. I talk from my notes on these comics. I don't go panel by panel. I try to do more than just summarize the stories. This is not a spoiler-free podcast. Dave Talks Comics is not a member of the Spoiler-Free Podcast Network. I try not to spoil everything, but in the process of talking about these comics, I will almost certainly spoil them in some way. Also in this episode, I talk about the comics I bought at the Capicon show in Dunloring, Virginia on December 1st. Namor the Submariner, issues 10, 11, and 12. This is the Invader story arc that I have been really looking forward to, even if you can't hear it in my voice. Okay, before getting into issues 10, 11, and 12, there are a couple of scenes in previous issues which lead up to these issues. In issue 6, there was a 3-page scene where it was set 1 year ago. There was a Nazi scientist and masterman returning to a warehouse in Berlin where a warrior woman has been kept in deep sleep. And then in issue 8, flashing back a little further to 1961, you get a scene where a Nazi scientist, the same Nazi scientist from issue 6, is almost killed as he attempts to escape from East Berlin after checking on Warrior Woman, who's been in deep sleep since 1945. And the issue there was, or the thing there was that the Berlin Wall was about to go up, and so they wanted to check on her while they could. And then they're chased by East Germans or Russian soldiers, and this scientist almost gets killed, but he obviously survives because you saw him in issue 6, which only took place 1 year ago. And then in issue 9, in the present, and the present at this point is 1991, the original Human Torch is captured by Masterman, who was this Nazi villain from World War II. So, issue 10, which is titled Dark Nativity, is by John Byrne, and he's credited with words and pictures. He wrote, he drew it, he inked it, he penciled it. I think he even did the letters. So, and the cover date for this issue is January 1991. So in this issue, Namor travels to Germany. He flies to Germany, not under his own power, but in a jet. Because, as you may remember, his wings, the wings on his feet, which allow him to fly, had been burned off a few issues ago. So he travels to Germany. Then you get an interlude, which is foreshadowing of a storyline that's yet to come, where you see Misty Knight and Colleen Wing confronting Danny Rand. And this was something that I mentioned briefly because there was at least one other interlude with these characters in a previous issue. Then the scene shifts to this Nazi scientist reviving, the one I mentioned before, reviving Warrior Woman from deep sleep using the blood of the original Human Torch. So Masterman had captured the original Human Torch in issue 9, and he and takes him to Germany, and then uses his blood to revive Warrior Woman. Now, the original Human Torch was an android, and this is one of these things that I never really could figure out. I'm not sure exactly what they mean by an android. I always thought it was something like a human-like robot is what an android was. And if he's a robot, then how come he has blood? And maybe there's some fluid, I don't know, of some sort in his body, but blood? So that never really completely understood it. And it was also used, this is not the first time that the original Human Torch has, his blood has been used for a transfusion. It also happened back in the Invaders comic back in the 1970s when it was used to save the life of Jacqueline Fallsworth, who then gained superpowers from it and became Spitfire, and whose superpower was speed. Okay, so the Nazi scientist uses this the Human Torch's blood to revive Warrior Woman, or Kriegerfrau, which is her German name, and then at that point, Namor crashes the party and does battle with Master Man and Warrior Woman. And that's where the issue ends. Issue number 10 ends. Okay, issue 11 is called Reunion. And once again, words and pictures by John Byrne. The cover date for this issue is February 1991. So, Namor is basically taken down by Warrior Woman and Master Man, or Ubermensch, I believe is the name they gave him, his German name. And now the Nazi scientist is toying with him, has him in some sort of a box and is overheating him because, of course, Namor needs water to survive. And so Namor starts hallucinating, and there's flashes back to his youth when he was a boy, and also to World War II when he was with the invaders, and he starts seeing things. Then we get another interlude with Misty Knight and Colleen Wing. This time they're in a hospital where Misty Knight is recovering from her encounter in the previous issue with Danny Rand, because Danny had basically tore off her arm. Now it's a bionic arm, so there's no flesh and blood damage, but still. And I think I mentioned this before, but Misty Knight had a relationship, a romantic relationship with Danny Rand. So this is all kind of strange. Okay, so back to the main story. So Namor breaks free from this machine that the Nazi scientist is torturing him in, and he fights a group of neo-Nazis, but he's still hallucinating. So he thinks he's fighting Nazi soldiers. He thinks it's World War II. And then at the last minute, at the end of the issue, 3 faces from Namor's past show up: Spitfire, Union Jack, and Namora. Now, once again, he's still hallucinating, so they look like they did back in the day. And that's where issue 11 ends. And then finally, issue 12 is titled The Invaders Fight Again. And in this case, the credits are a little different. It says written, penciled, inked, and lettered by John Byrne. And the cover date for this issue is March 1991. And this is a double-sized issue. I'm not sure the exact page count, but my guess is that means it's over 40 pages. So first we get an explanation of who it is that really showed up. And part of this is done through a flashback. Because Namorita, not Namora, but Namorita, who I believe her mother is Namora, and who Namorita is Namor's cousin, tells her story, or her story is told because at one point in issue 10, Namor had taken off because he thought he saw something, which eventually led to him finding this lab where the Human Torch and Warrior Woman were, and the Nazi scientist. So she tried to follow somebody. She ends up getting beaten up, and she barely makes it. She finally ends up taking off and flying to England, where she finds Lady Crichton, who was also known as Jacqueline Fallsworth, who was Spitfire during World War II. But now she's a much older woman, It is, 50 years later, or so close to that, because this is 1991, and let's see, World War II ended in 1945, so it's over 45 years later. So she has come back to help to find Namor with Lady Crichton, formerly known as Spitfire, and the new Union Jack, not the Union Jack from World War II. And actually there was 2 Union Jacks during World War II, and one of them actually dated back to World War I. And if you read the story from, I believe, Invaders 7, 8, and 9, I think it is, which is the story that introduces Union Jack. It's a really good one. And tells the story of the original Union Jack during World War I, who was still alive during World War II, and his brother, who had become a vampire and was known as Baron Blood, and was working with the Nazis. And that's a really good storyline. In fact, it's probably the best one of the first 10 issues of the Invaders, or my favorite at least. So we get this explanation of who they are. So it's a new Union Jack. It's not the Union Jack from World War II or the Union Jack from World War I, but another one, plus Spitfire or Lady Crichton, plus Namorita are the ones who Namor believes are Union Jack, Spitfire, and Namora. So after returning to his senses, after defeating the neo-Nazis who he's been fighting, Namor returns to his senses, and he splashes some water on himself, like one of those big 5 or 10 gallon jugs, and that seems to revive him. As red as his skin looks at the time he does that, I have to wonder if that would really be enough, but I'm sure it would help. So anyway, Master Man shows up because Master Man had taken off. Master Man and Warrior Woman had taken off, but Master Man shows up to do battle with Namor. But all of a sudden he loses his superpowers. And then some more bad guys show up, and Namor fights this other bad guy named Herr Nacht, which means Nacht is night, German for night, as in nighttime, not there's another word for night in German as, but I can't, like a soldier. I can't remember what that is. So Namorita fights Warrior Woman, Namor fights Herr Nacht. And at the same time, Lady Crichton takes down the Nazi scientist and is almost killed in the process. But then she gets saved in the end by a blood transfusion from the original Human Torch. Then Captain America shows up and helps out. So you kind of have the 3 original members of the Invaders, the original Human Torch, the Namor, and Captain America all together once again. So anyway, Master Man decides if he can't have Warrior Woman, he doesn't want to live, and he sets off this huge explosion which kills him and almost kills some other people, but I think nobody else is killed in the explosion, although it seems pretty big. So the story ends with a memorial service for the original Human Torch, although it turns out in the end that he isn't actually dead. But he has lost his superpowers, at least temporarily, although that's unclear, and I wasn't reading too much in the way of comic books at this point, so I'm not sure, and I haven't gone back and read those issues from that time. I'm not sure whether how permanent that loss of powers was. So in looking back at this storyline, I liked it. It's certainly the best story, I think, of the first 12 issues. It's my favorite of the first 12 issues. And I like it a lot because it goes back and looks and pulls things from older stories. It brings back characters like Master Man and Warrior Woman who first appeared in the Invaders. It brings in Spitfire, another character who first appeared in the Invaders. And it was partly the way he planted the seeds for it in the previous issues, in issues 6 and 8 and 9, and gave you little bits that helped out. But it's still not great stuff. It's good, but it's not great. I don't know. And there was one thing at the end where the original Human Torch okay, now that he's lost his powers, now apparently he is dating Anne, who's a character I hadn't mentioned but is in this story, and she's the widow of Toro, and Toro was the original Human Torch's sidekick during World War II. He also had flaming powers. If you read the Invaders comic book, and there are collections of it out there from the 1970s, you'll see Toro. Toro is one of the main characters, one of the top 5 or 6 who's in the series for most of the run. So the original Human Torch is now dating his former sidekick's wife, and it just seemed a little strange to me. It all happened so fast too, I don't know. I'm sure back then I wouldn't have questioned it, but I was a different person back then. So I like that the blend of the old and the new in this story. Oh, and then there was one other thing. This whole thing with Herr Nacht. Herr Nacht was this character who had bankrolled the scientist who revived Warrior Woman and Master Man. And apparently he was infatuated with Warrior Woman. And he's the one who did whatever it took to somehow he gained Master Man's powers, and Master Man lost his superpowers, as I mentioned. And I just don't understand. I just thought it was kind of silly, the whole thing, that apparently he was infatuated with her, and she seemed to be kind of indifferent and also a little nutso, as if something had happened while she was in deep sleep, as if her body had not been preserved properly, hadn't been getting enough oxygen or something. And she really didn't seem that interested in him. But I don't know, maybe this is John Byrne making some sort of a commentary on Nazis or male-female relations, or I don't know. Anyway, like I said, this is my favorite story so far, but I'm not crazy about this run of comic books. I still have the next 12 issues? No, 10 issues? I have at least through issue 22 of Namor. At some point I do want to get back to it and try to read it. At least I would like to read this arc with Iron Fist, Danny Rand, and Misty Knight and Colleen Wing. But at this point, I think it's time for me to take a break. I now have, as I mentioned on a previous issue, the first 12 issues of Alpha Flight, which John Byrne wrote and drew several years before this run on Namor. And I want to try reading those. I believe I have read them all before, but I'd like to try reading them again. And I may just talk about them on this show. So that's it for Namor for now. What I bought at the Capital Associates comic book show at the Dunloring Volunteer Fire Department. This is a show which they hold about 5 times a year. It's a small show, as should not be a surprise since it's held in the back of in the hall at the back of a volunteer fire department. There's, I don't know, maybe 20 dealers there or something like that. There's some artists, although I really didn't check out the artists. I just dug through the boxes of a few dealers, bought a handful of books, and then moved on because I had other things to do with my day. The first thing I bought, and these were all, I got all these comics from the same dealer, and he was selling them for $1 a piece, and buy 10, get 1 free. I spent a total of $12 plus $3 to get in the door, so $15. I got 13 comics. The first thing I picked out was he had a whole bunch of issues of the Question series. This is the series from the 1980s, or that at least started in the 1980s. This is the one that was written by Denny O'Neil and drawn by Dennis Cowan and Rick Magyar. I had previously, about a year ago, I bought the first 3 issues and read those and enjoyed them. I thought they were good. I liked them because they felt very late 1980s to me. And I'm not sure exactly what that means, but I guess some of the tropes that show up in those comics, the sorts of villains that show up, just reminded me of things that I had seen in the 80s in comic books like the New Teen Titans, some of the urban, when I say urban, I mean some of the villains they would encounter who were kind of street-level villains. And that's what the question seems to be dealing with, at least in those first 3 issues. Not entirely, not just that, but there's some of that. So I picked out the first. He had a ton of issues. I didn't want to buy a ton, but I bought the next 8 issues. So I bought issues 4 through 11, and I believe 11 is the end of a 3-part story. And I figured that out by looking at the Grand Comics database. So that was that was the first thing I picked out. Then I also found a copy of Marvel Team Up number 100. This is a classic issue which I bought originally back in the day, and it's Marvel Team Up, of course, was the book that featured Spider-Man teaming up with other people. In this case, there's actually 2 stories in this book. Only one of them features Spider-Man, and that's Spider-Man and the Fantastic Four. And this story also introduces Karma, who is kind of the villain in this story, but then later becomes a member of the New Mutants. So I hope that doesn't spoil anything for anyone. And the story is drawn by Frank Miller. I believe he's credited as co-creator. Yes, co-creator. It's written by Chris Claremont and drawn by Frank Miller, and the inks are by Bob Wyacek. And then the backup story, which is probably the reason I bought this, is it's an X-Men story. It's Storm, well, kind of an X-Men story. It's a team-up of Storm and the Black Panther, and it's written, the writer, co-plotters, artists are Chris Claremont, John Byrne, and Bob McLeod, or Cloud, I'm not sure. And that's probably the reason I picked this up. And I remember buying this from the Chevy Chase Pharmacy back in the day. Let's see, this is from 1980, yes, back in the day. And I had it for quite a while. I'm not sure what happened to it, but I really wanted to read it again and have a copy. And this is actually a pretty nice copy that I picked up for $1. I mean, it's in very nice shape. So far, I haven't read any of these comics or reread them. So next, I picked up Iron Man number 149, and earlier this year, at this is part 1 of Doom Quest, which is the story in which Iron Man faces off against Dr. Doom, and there's some time travel involved. They're involved in an explosion, I believe, at the end of 149, and they wind up back in the medieval times in King Arthur's court. And I picked up 150. This is a story which I had read a long time ago. I don't know if I owned it or if I read somebody else's copy, but I picked up issue 150 I bought it from the Wild Pig comics at the CGS Super Show earlier this year, that would be 2013, and they didn't have 149, so all I got was 150, which is a great cover of Iron Man facing off against Dr. Doom, but I really wanted 149, and when I saw it, I had to pick it up. It's not in the best of shape. It's a little dinged up. It's certainly not near mint or even very fine, I don't think. But now I have the whole story, so I can go back and reread it. And then finally, I picked up 3 issues of the Nam. This is this war comic which is set during the Vietnam War, and he had a whole bunch. I decided just to pick up 3 because it looked like, starting with I picked up 13 through 15, 13, 14, and 15. I've read 1 through 12. I have the trades, the original trades, which collected the first 12 issues, 1 through 4, then 5 through 8, and then 9 through 12. There's a newer editions of the trades. I think there's the first one collects 1 through 10, then 11 through 20, and maybe a third one that collects 21 to 30. I'm not sure. So, but these are these continue the story of what I've read so far, although it's been a few years now since I read those. So that's everything I got. I really like this show. It's good for picking up a little stuff here and there. It's good to go with a big list because you never know what you will find. I didn't expect to find a question there. There was other stuff that I hoped to find that I didn't find there. But the show happens about about 5 times a year. But it always seems like I can only make it about once a year because of scheduling conflicts. I've got other stuff going on. So that's what I bought very recently at the most recent edition of the Capital Associates Convention. That's it for episode 13 of Dave Talks Comics. Questions or comments can be posted on the episode page at davetalkscomics.com, or you can tweet them to me at DaveTalksComics, or you can email your questions or comments to dave@davetalkscomics.com. I already have recorded episode 14, and I hope to have that out in another week. And I have ideas for episode 15.